Greetings there, everybody. Pete here from Comic Book Geezers. Welcome to another edition of the show. Along with me this week, we got Kirk is back. What's happening, my fellow geezer? How you doing?
Pretty good, my friend. Pretty good. Hanging in there, you know?
Good to hear. Good to hear. We're all on lockdown, so we're just trying to make the best of it. Do you know, I bet you didn't even realize this, that we were supposed to be going to East Coast Comic Con this weekend?
I did. I looked at my planner and I saw it there and I was like, oh, man.
I know, right? How disappointing. I was so looking forward to that.
Oh.
Well, we'll have to make up for it at some point. But anyway, we digress. So today we've got an episode by request, and we've got a couple folks asking for us to cover Jack Kirby's Fourth World. So I know personally I didn't have any. Bill didn't have any. And I said, I'm pretty sure Kirk has either some or most of it. And of course, he came to the rescue and he's got basically the whole run. So I'm going to let Kirk talk a little bit about the history of this. I'll get us kicked off with it. This started in 1970, DC Comics. So as you know, Jack Kirby was at Marvel throughout the whole 60s. And all of a sudden, he defects over to DC. But he's got this grand kind of idea in his head of a new series. And I'll let Kirk take it over from there. And I guess Stan and the guys at Marvel were not too keen on it. So he packed his bags and went to the crosstown rivals, right?
Yeah, which, he moved to California, actually, at this point. He was living in New York, moved all the way to California to work on these books. In my opinion, some great stuff. And I hate to say it like this, unlike the Marvel stuff, still relatively affordable.
Relatively.
Don't come back sending, hate mail after this, because I was like, yeah, some of the issues, the first appearance of Darkseid and stuff, will run you money. But unlike a Spider-Man #1, or it's affordable.
Yeah, to an extent. Yeah,
to an extent. You'll drop for a high grade, like $200 or $300, which sadly to say isn't as bad as it can get. So
that is true. That is true.
I've heard stories that the original outline for this Fourth World was started as a Thor story that didn't quite. There was going to be a big blow up, and it was one of the reasons that Kirby left. I can't remember where I read that, so take it with a grain of salt. But that's.
Could you imagine Thor battling Darkseid? Oh. I'm getting chills.
Yeah, it would. I'll be honest, it would have been some great stuff.
Now, would we have had a Thanos if that would have happened? May not have needed Thanos, right?
Oh, yeah, really? I'll be honest, it would have been redundant at that point.
Yeah.
And, it made a cool Avengers franchise a different way, right?
Because yeah.
The Infinity Wars and everything different. But it's just great stuff. And what's fun with this stuff is, unlike the stuff at Marvel, Kirby was writing this stuff. He wasn't just drawing. But if you read, I reread New Gods #1 today, and there's a whole thing in there where they talk about how he would, you'd come to him with an idea, and I mean Stan Lee was great for pulling ideas out, and then Kirby would just blow it up. He would just kind of just add and build to it, and just flesh out the characters so well. And I think it's one of the sad things is because it always seems in a lot of ways, especially when I was younger, that Stan Lee gets put up here and Kirby is down here. Not that Kirby, didn't get recognized, but he never was, he was always kind of seen as almost a second-class citizen compared to Stan Lee. And in my opinion, he deserves a lot more recognition than he gets probably for the design and building of the Marvel Universe. The nice thing with the Fourth World is it's all his. So, and he gets recognized for that. So that's cool.
Cool. I feel like we have a third guest on here. Is that Kristen?
Hold on a second. Hey, man. Over down a bit. You're actually being recorded.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Sorry, technical difficulties there. But it's funny because when Kirby comes over to DC at this point, he ends up taking over Jimmy Olsen, which, no offense to me, if I don't know if people have read all the early stuff, it's not that impressive in my opinion. But I know there are people that love Jimmy Olsen, love Superman, and again, I love Superman, but I think the Jimmy Olsen book was very two-dimensional. Now, I don't know
It
what
was,
he was.
it was a starting point, right?
Yeah, this is what he does. He comes in at Jimmy Olsen 133, which I have a copy of right here, and it's very, it's kind of strange. You see, there's Superman getting knocked over by a biker dude, right? Like, what is that all about?
Yeah.
And it starts this whole thing with like he's duking it out with they send Jimmy Olsen with the Newsboy Legion, which was a 40s character that they revamped for this. They're the sons of the original Newsboys, which was kind of like a bunch of local kids from the neighborhood who used to beat up racketeers and Nazis during World War II. Kirby originally created those characters as well, so he gets a chance to come back, take some of his old characters, update them, and then he goes, I don't know, they said, he gets crazy with us because he's got these crazy biker dudes, and there's a moving mountain. And again, I don't want to give up the information on this because I really think people should go back and read this stuff. It's a bit crazy, but I opened up a couple. Like, you see, one issue deals with Jimmy. This is the next one I've got. Jimmy Olsen, green clone, right? Makes you wonder. Incredible Hulk? I don't know. I'm not drawing lines. But because there was a lot of back and forth back in the day between Marvel and DC. Some of it in good jest, and some of it you get to wonder about. But if you're looking at the cover too, Neil Adams cover. How do you go wrong with that? And again, but you get inside, and it's all Kirby.
Oh, look at that! I mean, right off the bat, you got the big splash page. God, I love it.
I love that.
Yeah, that's pretty damn cool. Yep.
They bring back. Some people may recognize him. That's the Guardian. He was another 40s character. And I'd like to give credit. This deals with a clone, too, because this is actually the clone of the original Guardian.
Oh, okay.
Right? A little ahead of Marvel, I think, with the cloning stuff. So,
and they resurrected the Guardian on the CW Supergirl show.
Yeah. And if you notice, there's a couple of things in there. The van in one of the scenes is listed as like the Stars and Stripes van, which was like the original magazine that those comics were published in. There's a lot of like little Easter eggs in there. But then we see this dark villain in the background who's plotting against, Jimmy and the boys there. And it's Darkseid, right? He appeared like 2 issues earlier for the first time. I do not have that issue. I was pricing out a copy, and I don't know.
Got to think long and hard about that one, right?
Yeah. But definitely then we move on. What I love, too, about Kirby stuff is, you see, he starts building it, and there's all these adventures, and they all deal with, like, these weird, they're hanging out in this area. Kirby would also do, like, he'd draw pictures and overlaid them over photographs. Yeah. And you gotta love this stuff. I mean, I want to show you this one. I saw this earlier. I tell you that. And this stuff is really weird because it's got like little miniature soldiers fighting in it. You've got that are like all sorts of really weird. Look at just great fight scenes, like stuff that, you know what, reminds me of definitely the stuff he was doing in Fantastic Four prior to this,
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually. And that's very different than probably what you would see in Superman, any Superman comic before he showed up.
This stuff is very, it's what I like is the storyline builds on itself. Back then, you had like one and done. I mean, which is great when you're going back and you're rereading this stuff as we've gotten older and you're buying the books. But the Fourth World stuff all connects. But you can just stick to one of the titles that was involved with. Because initially this all starts with Jimmy Olsen. It's the only thing out. But here's
that's 1970 about, right?
Yeah, this starts in 70. See this?
Oh, yeah, look at that. Wow. Okay.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So, he does a bunch of these, and they're just great. They're a lot of fun. But as I said, you got to wonder whether, Kirby was drinking or doing something. I don't know. I love the man, so I'm not speaking ill of him. But, you know, Don Rickles, the man brought Don Rickles into the book. You know, again, love Don Rickles too. Not.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
But definitely, like, a lot of really off the wall sort of ideas popping through here that you would not see anywhere else. So,
so in other words, DC said to Jack, it's like, buddy, we love you. We love having you on board. Do whatever the hell you want.
And that's what he did. He took them at their word. He was like, dude, you want, give me the keys? I'm gonna see what I can do with them. And he did. He did crazy stuff. You know, vampires appearing, like, again, who look like extras from a Kiss concert. I mean, it's just, you gotta love this. Really fun stuff. And these books, as I said, they're affordable. You know, and then, you know, he does a whole line of these. Now, during all this, you're dealing with Darkseid's one of the main villains, so he's popping in and out. And I think he was smart. He kind of like, he was like, I'll see what I can get away with. And they let him get away with it. God bless. I love this cover too. This kind of reminds me of some of his like Commandy stuff that came later, a little bit. And the sad part is he only did, what was it? He went all the way to 150, and then he called it quits. So on this, but as you can see, like, that's Jimmy Olsen. Yeah, that's kind of a badass Jimmy Olsen.
It
know?
Certainly is. I was just going to say that. That's cool cover.
Yeah, Jimmy Olsen actually got to be a much cooler character. And you know, it's interesting. They let's open this one up. I haven't seen this one in years. So, but you know, these were really, you know, he did all sorts of stuff here. Here's another one. Yeah, Jimmy Olsen needing a haircut.
He certainly does. He's looking worse than me right now. It's like, holy moly.
He was doing the COVID haircut before it was popular. But you know, it's. The stuff was just great. You know, you got the villains in the background with the great eyebrows. I love those. You know, again, fun stuff. With Kirby's art too, like, looking in the background was half the fun, because you could just, so much weirdness in the backgrounds and stuff. You know, like, you know, he just give you a page of like strange monsters growling. I mean, how do you beat that?
And you know what's scary too is that he, whether it was with Marvel or with DC, he was working on so many books simultaneously, and yet the quality of every panel is like beyond amazing.
I don't think this man slept for the last 50 years of his life.
No, he must not have. Yeah, from what, like 63 through what, the end of the 70s? I mean, that's only, you know, close to 20 years of like just impeccable stuff. Impeccable.
Yeah, I would say, and you know, again, I give like the only thing he wasn't doing with these books was inking them. I mean, this was not a, you know, I just finished this up a little bit and I'll hand it off to this guy. He was just constantly working. The last one I just got, actually, I picked up just a couple days ago. Actually, one of the shops on Comic Collectors shipped this to me, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But again, because I'm trying to fill in my Jimmy Olsen set. As I said, I'm missing, I think, like 4 or 5 of the books. But then at 150, he was out. He called it a night. But as I said, the underlying thing was all this stuff with Darkseid. So then, like a year later, they give him the rights to start doing 3 new books. And we're going to go on to the first one in the set, which I think we'll start with because people are talking about it because there's a movie coming out, is the new Gods film. So, and again, here's like another one of those covers with the photo in the back, you know? Just incredible stuff. And then you got number 2, where finally, you know, we get to see Darkseid. Now, again, for the people who don't know, Orion here is the son of Darkseid. So, you didn't know that. And so this deals with him coming to Earth and deciding he's going to duke it out to save the whole world. And That's a good run. The sad part were these books, when they were originally issued, weren't that popular.
No, they weren't at all. They weren't at all.
Um,
Now, do you think if he would have stayed with DC and not come back to Marvel, do you think he would have tried to resurrect or keep that going and incorporate the Eternals into that whole storyline? And was the Eternals kind of his second wave of that idea when he got back to Marvel?
I think he was. I think he took it and he was kind of like, well, I didn't quite get what I wanted the first time there, so I'm going to do it here. And it didn't do well in Marvel.
I was just going to say that. It did really his idea and didn't do on either end. And yet they're making movies out of both of them. Go figure.
Yeah, but look at him now.
Way ahead of its time, Kirk. That's why.
Yeah.
Because I think that sort of storyline works better today than it would have in 1970 or 1977.
Yeah. Because, you know, you got an Eternals film coming out. Darkseid was supposed to be part of the Justice League film, even though that's kind of on hold now with all of the issues that they've had with the last. But, you know, again, his ideas have exploded. And I mean, you know, it's like one of those things like that, you know, a true artist is not true, you know, respected in his lifetime. I think Kirby got some of the respect he deserved during his life, but not half of what he deserved.
Right.
So,
and what he's getting now. Yeah.
Now he's got, now people know, he asked people like the king, you know, and everybody's like, oh, Kirby. And
that's right.
You know what? I got to say, when I was a kid, though, I didn't always appreciate these books as much. As I've gone back and you look at them now and you're like, wow. And as I said, I think he was writing for an older, you know, patron there. And the problem was these books at that point were a lot of them were being sold for kids still.
And right over their heads. Yeah, I mean, you know, I never read the New God stuff or any of the Fourth World stuff, but I remember reading the Eternals books, and I bought them because I love Kirby. But that stuff went right over my head. Yeah. You think I understood any of those Eternal stories back in 1977? I read them because they were cool. The artwork was great, but I was like, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, he lost me too on that Black Panther run. As great as it was cool, the artwork was fantastic, but I was like, you know, but because he was like up in the complexity angle on all those 70s series, because, you know, the Fantastic Four and the Thor stuff in the 60s, ahead of its time as well, but a little more kind of easier to digest, right?
Yeah, I think it was good that you had somebody like Stan Lee
reining him in a little bit.
Yeah. I think that was the problem, because I think Stan realized that, you know, he knew the market better. He was like, this is who we're selling to. You can't get this crap. And there was some push, though, at this point, because college kids were starting to read this stuff, you know. You start seeing, especially in the 70s, you start seeing much more complex ideas being presented in comic books. You know, you see things like the Warlock, which was kind of like, there was a lot of Christian symbolism in there. You know, you start seeing stuff like that because the guys writing this stuff were taking things and adding things to it and making it for a much more mature audience. But again, I think Kirby was the first one to be doing this. So it really kind of just, you know, kind of blew people's minds. And as I said, I think it's great. Now people are going back, looking at this stuff and going, oh my God, how did I miss this the first time?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
All right, so we're going to look, and again, here's another photo cover. This is where their version of Death, which I'm going to say, you know, this is some good stuff. And again, I'm going to open up some of these covers and you're looking at the stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you see these space scenes, which Kirby needed to take his characters into space per issue. You know, it's like every time he did like you know, with the Fantastic Four, with this stuff, anything that was going on in space was just fantastic.
That was his element, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, you know, you see, you know,
that's why that Black Panther run we were talking about before didn't work, because that character doesn't belong in space, right?
Yeah.
Even to an extent, what he did in Captain America, as great as the artwork was, that's not really his thing. Every series that he worked on that really worked well was because he could take those characters into cosmic directions, right? I mean, it's just, that's what he was good at.
Well, I say, you look at the stuff with the Fantastic Four. I mean, his art fit those characters and everything so well. And that's why I think those books are still to this day considered like classics as well.
Yeah.
It's just so solid. And again, this book, The New Gods, only ran 11 issues. I don't have a 4 and 5. Those are the 2 I'm missing on this run. But then we go to 6, and again, big splash covers, great colors used in these things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great use of green on there. That's awesome.
Yeah, isn't that great? I just gotta love that. It's a great cover. And here, I got 2 of these actually. Look at this. So just because you can't have one, but
nice.
you see,
yeah, that's awesome too. And again, if Bill was here right now, Bill would be like, and look at the monsters, right? I mean, because Kirby was all about the monsters. He was the best at drawing monsters.
Well, the weird thing is he's one of the guys who started the romance comic books too.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yep.
He was all over the place. Just brilliant. I love this one. This poor guy has gotten himself half beaten to death.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Look at that. He's like, you got to get out, But again, the covers were great. He could do a great layout and cover. I love this cover. So with Bug there, another new god, and again, there were a whole bunch of these characters, and a lot of them have, now you see them in a lot of the regular DC books. The guys who grew up and then went into the industry loved this run and have used it to bring in different stuff to their field. This is number 10, and you see there he is. I say great use of colors, everything. And if you look, it's kind of, you get in the background. He didn't even fully draw in the skyscraper and everything, but it just works. It just He didn't have to. It just kind of, and it seems so much better than half the stuff you look at.
And you got that Loki looking guy in the bottom corner.
Yeah, he appears later in the Forever People too.
Really?
Yeah, it said all these things, and that was the interesting thing. Like, if you read all the books together, the story weaves. But you could just say, well, you know what? I'm just going to read New Gods, or I'm just going to read Mr. Miracle, or the Forever People. But again, sometimes it would help to get like the background of the history. I mean, again, this book dealt with Orion and the other gods. This is the final issue of the original run. And again, so many people liked this. That this died out in about 72. In the early 80s, they decided to pitch the idea to do it again. So they bring it back. And they only brought back the New Gods and Mr. Miracle at this point. So they did a couple issues of this. And again, the fight. And this is all still continuing. The fight between him, Orion's dark side. They're duking it out.
And notice the Kirby-esque artwork on those covers, because I noticed that a lot of series that Kirby started, whether it would be Marvel or DC, they sometimes after he would leave the series, they would bring in for a couple of issues someone who drew kind of like him, just to get that feel, right? Because I mean, because the extreme is like when Kirby left the Machine Man book and they brought in Steve Ditko. That didn't work at all. But like you can see right here, I mean, that cover right there is very Kirby looking.
Especially you look at the guy's face here. I mean, that looks. But again, these are guys who love Kirby. I mean, if you got into this field and you didn't like Kirby, you really got to question something. Yeah. Again, we did a couple more issues of this, and again, and this really says something to DC because they're trying to finish this story.
Right.
And so they come back. They do that one, and I think that's a Marshall Rogers cover. But again, really nice stuff. I've been going back trying to pick up all the pieces of the story. And
I wonder how Jack felt, or if he actually read any of the continuation issues.
I don't know, but I would think that there would be like some kind of like, well,
I'm sure he got paid for it, but yeah.
Well, actually, probably not. Because, these books back in the day, you wrote or drew, and you kind of signed your rights away. Like
even as the creator. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm going to be honest, and DC had a bunch of lawyers, man. You created something, you would then, they'd throw you a couple of bucks. And when I say a couple of bucks, it's probably just a couple of bucks. But then, you know what, if they decided to issue a T-shirt or they were going to do something else, that went into DC's pocket. It didn't come into the artist's pocket. It wasn't until later that you started seeing more and more of creators suing and winning the rights to their own creations and saying, hey, I created this and now you're making a movie? Where's my money? And so that's didn't come out. Kirby got, I'll be honest, he got screwed in a lot of this stuff. A lot of his original art was taken too. He'd give the product in, and then it became DC and Marvel's, whoever. This wasn't, you know, DC or Marvel. This was practice. You didn't really start seeing Atlas Comics in the 70s was one of the first that started pushing the idea that the creation and the art and all that belonged to the artists, which it should have. And
yeah.
But you know, we go off on that for a while. But pick up the New Gods one because I know we're gonna do another segment. So here, and you start seeing things. This run finished up after continuing the original numbering sequence for 8 more issues, and that's the final one. Ooh, you know, again, it's kind of like, I think that's a Milgram cover at this. No, it's Stanton and Layton. Sorry.
Okay.
And you know, again, not bad. It was pretty good, but DC still like, all right, so that gets canceled again. So what do you think? They ended up, and I found a couple of these actually while I was doing some work this weekend. They started up the Adventure Comics a couple of years later. And then as you can see down in the bottom, there's our favorite guy.
That's right.
And they're starting the story again, trying to finish it up. And they did kind of finish it up in this. And that was the end of that, you know, the whole fourth world. On the next episode, we're going to look at, we still haven't hit Mr. Miracle or the Forever People, which we'll have some good time talking about.
That's right. So stay tuned, everybody, for part 2 of Jack Kirby's Fourth World. I am Pete. For Kirk, we'll see you guys for part 2. Stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you tell your friends. Thanks for all your views and watching. Hope everybody's doing well out there in lockdown, and we'll see you real soon for part 2 of Fourth World. Take care, everybody.